Welcome everyone, I'm Eugenio from HelloFresh, and I'm going to be talking about how to launch and scale Apple Search Ads using ASO data. So going through the agenda a little bit. First of all, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm going to introduce the company a little bit, although I think most of you guys already know it. I'm going to talk about my experience with Apple Search Ads and about the topic. Then we're going to we're going to talk about the data that we're going to choose and the analysis we're going to make, accounting for cannibalization, and also how to build the accounts and their rollout. And in the end, we talk about the relationship with brand, because when you talk about cannibalization, obviously brand plays a big role. What? Okay, so this is me. I've been working on Apple Search Ads for the past, I think, almost 4 years. I started at Omeo when I was an SEA manager there, and then I moved to HelloFresh, and I changed a little bit my perspective, and I think it's pretty important for this presentation, because at HelloFresh I work as a search manager, so I'm taking care both of the organic and on the paid bit. Then, yeah, HelloFresh. So HelloFresh is like the biggest meal kit company in the world. We were founded here in Berlin in 2011. And basically, what we do is that we deliver ingredients and recipes, and you can prepare them. And where the app plays a role is basically, of course, you can sign up, but you can also cook with the app. So we have 5 apps around the globe, 5 different brands across 16 countries, and then we have over 10,000 recipes in our database that you can find on our apps. And then those are the big numbers of meals that we deliver, almost 7 million worldwide, and 600 million in 2020 with the pandemic, and we are quite a bit of employees at the moment. Whatever. So here the presentation starts. Sorry for this quick introduction and the problems. So how do we leverage ASO data when it comes to scaling Apple Search Ads? Before starting, I think it's quite important to analyze the SERP. So the first thing we need to do is search on the App Store and figure out how does it look. So we have the screen is divided in 2, and it's basically the 2 placement, ASA and ASO. They look quite similar, apart from some ads featuring for the Apple Search Ads bit, but in reality, how you end up there is really different, because ASO is an history-driven channel, while Apple Search Ads is mostly based on keywords and bids, so it's more reactive, and it's okay, so APS Berlin, I guess. And we are back. So, yeah, it's about, basically one is about history and it improves through time, and the other one is about the advertiser being willing to be there at that very moment in time. But which data should we take? What should we look? So historically, the 2 channels have been working together already for the creative optimization. So basically, we use Apple Search Ads to optimize the creative sets for ASO. But now, what I wonder is, why shouldn't we use the other data for optimizing Apple Search Ads and for launching Apple Search Ads? So all the data that make our ranking, all the rankings, the volumes, and so on, which are pretty interesting, and I would say, and they're not about practice at the moment. So what I use, I look at the metadata, the ratings, and then at the app downloads for certain keywords to try to figure out how to scale quickly Apple Search Ads across countries. Of course, ratings is how well your app is rated, and the metadata is what you choose to put in the store, so is your description and so on. But then you have app downloads per keyword that you can find on most ASO tools, and that already can give you a pretty good idea, and those are yeah, it's basically the behavior. So how well is your conversion rate or your CTR when it comes to ASO? Although you don't have those data, you can leverage them. because we take rankings as a constant variable, and then we have the metadata that influence the app performance. So basically, you can infer that the way how users interact with your ASO placement is actually, and is the way that rankings are defined, so is the differentiator across the keywords. So this means that we can actually use the average position in ASO to figure out the expected performance for Apple search ads before launching. So you see the average position and you expect like a performance. So we look at data analysis. So as I just mentioned, the average position is the most important thing over here. While looking at the average position, you need to make a couple of considerations, right? Because the higher your position, the better the performance will be, what we just said, but at the same time, the higher the risk of cannibalization. And we don't want that really, because ASO is more efficient. So as I said before, now my perspective is a bit different, so I'm optimizing for ASA and ASO together, so the CAC is going to get worse as the cannibalization increases. Also, you can look at competition index to figure out how competitive the keyword is going to be, so more or less how much the CPC is going to look like, and also like we have traffic and download estimates to have a look, like to figure out basically how much volume is behind keywords. So this is a framework I like to use. So basically, I apply the BCG metrics to the data we just mentioned, and I use as a dimension on the axis like the average position for ASO, and then the keyword volume. And with that, I can basically like segment and cluster each and every ASO keyword into a category, and that's going to help me like in the end scaling quickly, because I know, okay, this keyword falls there and it's going to have a certain behavior. So we have the stars, which are high position, high volume keywords, then the cash cows. So basically are the keywords where you rank really high, but you don't have that much of volume. Then the question marks, you rank low, but there's a lot of traffic over there. So you don't really know what's going to be your performance. And then you have the dogs, which are basically low position, low volume, and we should focus on them too much. Yeah, so how do we check for performance of these four categories? It's really, really important, because at the end of the day, cannibalization is a factor, and stars look great when like you're an SEA manager. You're like, there's a lot of volume and the expected performance is great. Why shouldn't I push it straight away? Because it might not be as efficient as the platform shows. And this is the way basically how I assess it. So this is the analysis I did for the stars, and but also I'm going to analyze all the other ones after, no worries. So when it comes to the stars, I think it's really important to define and to determine the incrementality of conversions and the cost that you're going to pay for them. So basically what I do is that I take two different time frames, like the conversions and the cost of two different time frames, and then I make the difference, and I figure out, okay, this is the incremental conversions that we get, and this is the incremental cost that. So I have two time frames, T0 and T1. So T0 is when I have only ASO, and T1 is when I have both ASO and ASA. At T0, we have zero costs. At T1, we have the cost for Apple search ads. And at T0, you only have ASO, and at T1, you have the conversions for ASA and ASO. So you see that the deltas, the delta CAC, which is the most important thing over here, so how much you're going to pay for the extra installs are the difference of, not installs or activation, whatever you want, or conversions, is the difference between the conversions in the second spot on T1 minus the conversions at T0 divided by the ASO cost. And then in this way you see straight away the difference by a normal CAC, because the normal CAC would be only like ASA conversions divided ASA cost. And we don't take care of, we don't care about ASO at all. Then we go to the question marks. So the question marks are question marks. We don't know anything about them because we rank low. So we have two big scenarios when it comes to them. So you could even be that your app is not as good as your competitor, is not as good, is not as popular, doesn't have as many ratings, as we said, the metadata is less optimized, or like you have less history, hence ASO doesn't rank. In this scenario, Apple Search Ads is amazing because it's the use case, so you just want to push it and see. But at the same time, you don't know because it could actually be the scenario number 2, which is when your app is not as good as the competitors one. You're replying to the customers or the user's question when typing in the query. So other companies might be more relevant than you, and then when you start bidding on Apple Search Ads, well, the performance is not as good as the average, let's say. And then we got the low-value keywords, which are like the cash cows and the dogs. I put them together because at the end of the day, as the costs are really small, although the CAC might be high for the cash cows because there's going to be a lot of cannibalization, it just makes sense to push because you want to keep the competitors outside there, and it's not going to influence your top-line performance. So a lot of good talks, but how do we build the accounts and how do we roll them out? So basically the structure, I still like and use the Apple one. So basically, because it's too important to align the user intent with the keywords and the ad. You cannot get around that. If a user asks a question, you want to reply in the most efficient way. And at the same time, I tend to put broad together because it's more efficient and convenient, but I'm not gonna criticize anyone that has a different broad ad group or different user intent because I think it's a good idea if you can automate that. But then when it comes to the rollout, here is the really different bit because basically what I do is that I roll out only exact keyword first, and then the exact keywords, I do not roll them out at the same time. Why? Because we go back to the formula I mentioned before. So when it comes to the stars, you don't want to roll them out at the same time as the question marks and the cash cows, because you need to figure out the incrementality. So basically, my suggestion would be to start with the stars, and then you roll all the rest, simply because with the stars, then you can see the incremental value, right? Before you only have ASO conversions, and then after you have ASA plus ASO, and then you also have the cost, and then you see how much you're actually paying for those conversions. At the same time, you can also roll out the question marks and the cash cows first, but then make sure that some time has passed. And lastly, broad, when you have time and space and you have capacity. But why should we do this? It's a lot of mess. It's easier to launch just broad. Everybody Apple reps are going to tell you just launch broad. It's fine. It's going to work. You're going to scale quickly, which is the most important thing. But no, to me, no. I think I like to go for efficient things. I love exacts, and I love to have a bit more of control. And in this way, I can actually scale several countries quicker and then go deeply into the countries, right? So the countries might not be as big as the one, as Apple would suggest. They would still tell you there's a lot of potential, but in this case, you're getting the most efficient traffic starting with this approach. And you would also know how much you're actually paying for the stars, which are the most important bit of your traffic. Yeah, also, it helps you to control very well on cannibalization. So in this way, you don't basically lose the big picture, which otherwise you would lose, because if you don't control it at the very first time, then you need to do a test. So you either pause the stars to figure out the incrementality, or you need to figure out some other way. But what about brand then? Where does brand fall into? Brand is a star. Brand is a star because 90% of the apps probably have more traffic coming from brand than from generic, simply because the App Store is mostly brand driven. When the users get into the App Store, they want already an app, a big part of the time. So for every advertiser, the brand is really important. I'm not going to tell you not to bid on brand, because it's important to bid on brand on too many cases, but I'm just going to say that you really need to be aware of what you're doing. The formula is over there. That's what I think it's relevant. You really need to assess incrementality on a case-by-case scenario, because sometimes if the competitors bidding on your brand are not really direct, then it could be the case that is not worth to bid on it. Like you see your CTRs on your competitors, and then you can infer what's going to be the other competitors' CTR on yours, and then that's also another way of looking at it, right? So yeah, that's basically it. If you guys have any questions, it's the time.